What's going on, gamers? So we have an interesting video here by Austin Evans saying why the PS6 is years away, and I agree with him in some sense. Now, when you think about like the Pro getting PSSR 2 and all that, I'm like, okay, well, yeah, they did Project Amethyst with that, so that needs to shine. GTA 6 needs to shine with that, and it needs some time to do that. And it needs to deliver the way that it was supposed to deliver, and you're supposed to get the generation you're supposed to get. So it makes sense for Sony to delay it out a year on top of with all the other stuff that's going on the market. So we're going to find out some extra information here. Let me know what you guys think. Like, I'm subscribed as usual. Let's go.
Back in November, we did a video looking at the PS5 on its 5th anniversary. They had just publicly announced Project Amethyst, their next-gen tech collaboration with AMD. I mean, the rumors were heavily pointing toward a late 2027 launch, right alongside whatever next-gen Xbox Microsoft is cooking up. It really felt like Sony was hyping the PS6 before most people had even gotten on board with the PS5. Then, essentially overnight, the RAM crisis threw the entire tech industry into chaos.
Yeah, one night.
Spiked 300% or more. GPUs and SSDs are starting to rise in price. I mean, pretty much every component that could go into the PS6 was in trouble. Surprise, surprise. Recent reports are now suggesting that Sony might push the PS6 back to not just 2028, but potentially even 2029. Now, while I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, delaying things even a year is a very big deal. It is also absolutely the right decision to make. So let's start with the obvious question.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, we got to delay because for PlayStation, it's more important to delay than Xbox. Because Microsoft's not looking to get on the market to sell like 50 million, even 40 million, 30, you know what I mean? There's no way they're even going to get even that close. They're looking at most, and they would be happy if they probably got 10 million off of the Magnus. Where Sony's still going to the usual, PlayStation route, where it's like, we're still trying to get like 70 million, 80 million, you know what I mean? Something like up there. I don't know about 100 million if it's going to be priced like that, and they don't do price drops, because that's what it seems like the way things are going now. But they're not looking to get in the market and screw up the beginning. No, that's very important to PlayStation. That's a huger part of the foundation of the company compared to Xbox having, its part in the Microsoft Corporation, which is nowhere near as big as PlayStation is to Sony. And, same thing with Nintendo, how huge the Switch is to Nintendo. That's a video game only company. So they got to take this way more serious.
5 actually obsolete? Now look, I'm not going to pretend that the hardware is cutting edge anymore. The RDNA 2 GPU is starting to show its age, lacking proper AI upscaling, frame generation, or support for path tracing. These are areas where Nvidia and even AMD's newer cards have significantly pulled ahead. But the PS5 Zen 2 CPU is actually holding up pretty well, far better than the PS4's wimpy Jaguar CPU, which is absolutely holding things back pretty much from day one. But here's the thing. For the vast majority of games, the PS5 doesn't look that much worse than the PC. Developers are not struggling to get their games to support the ancient PS5 hardware. I mean, a lot of games like Fortnite are still freaking supported on the PS4. Nobody is begging for a new console yet. Which brings us to the Pro. The base PS4 was an HD console launched into a world that was quickly going 4K. So releasing a 4K capable PS4 Pro was a clear value, but with the PS5 Pro, what exactly is the pitch? Slightly better resolutions and frame rates? I mean, it's a tough sell that's hard to justify. I mean, you're spending $750 when the base PS5 handles most games just fine. Now, sure, a big system seller will likely be GTA 6 when it launches this fall. Hopefully. The PS5 Pro will be the most powerful way to play it until the PC version arrives eventually. But probably the big selling point and an actual upgrade with the PS5 Pro is PSSR, PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. Every time I say PSSR, the Soviet Union theme song does play in my head. I just want everyone to know. A quick primer. This is Sony's answer to DLSS. It's AI-powered upscaling that lets games render at a lower resolution, then upscale the image to look higher res. The idea is that you get better visuals without tanking performance. The current version of the PS5 Pro is decent, but it's also limited compared to what Nvidia offers. Now, I actually got the chance to try the latest DLSS 4.5 at CES, and it is seriously impressive.
Yeah, it is, but I'm annoyed at Nvidia and I'm tired of Windows. But the PSSR 2 coming out with the price of the PS5 Pro compared to what it would take to get that in the PC market today is ridiculous. That's the thing where it's like the price performance value is justified with the Pro now. And when you think about how much better it's going to get with PSSR 2, yeah, it's a steal because they've destroyed the PC gaming market. Not because by default, but because just the way that things are at the moment. It sucks. Nothing goes down anymore. Everything is going up. And the PC market got manipulated significantly worse than the console market. And, NVIDIA had a lot to do with that, so screw them. I mean, yeah, DLSS 4.5 is nice, but after I'm getting 60 plus frames, it's just icing on the cake to me. Like all this, like 200 fake frames and all that's like, I mean, that's cool and all, but if I'm getting my 60 plus, even 70 and 80, what does it really matter after that point? It doesn't matter to me. And that's why I feel like when you look at the common denominator whole, even they're thinking, the Pro is an expensive piece of hardware. So they're not even looking to get PCs that are going to be running stuff like that because most of the gamers that play Steam, Valve showed you, they don't have those type of rigs. They can't afford it. So that's where the Pro is like more attractive than ever with GTA 6 around the corner and a lot of other games.
Frame generation making things look smoother and upscaling making things look better, it's clear that AMD and Sony are playing catch up.
Yeah.
Not like ketchup with fries, catch up. But PSSR 2.0 is arriving soon, and from what we're hearing, it should bring significantly improved image quality and potentially frame generation support. Squeezing more out of the existing hardware could go a long way to justifying why you need a PS5 Pro without needing a full generational leap. They're buying themselves time. But think about what we're really saying here. If it's still this hard to justify the Pro 2 years after launch, how do you possibly justify an entirely new console? A good example of a game that does take advantage of the PS5 Pro is Ghost of Yotei. So this will not only handle the PS5 Pro's additional hardware when it comes to like ray tracing, but it also does utilize PSSR to hit a pretty smooth 60 FPS with ray tracing engaged. Now, this is a game that I will say does look better on the Pro. I would argue that unless you're putting it side by side, it is not like a completely night and day difference. Like, yes, being able to play with ray tracing and 60 FPS is nice, but you think in previous generations where, the PS4 Pro, it was running at like a massively improved resolution. Or even think about when the original PS5 launched, it could play games at 60 or even 120 FPS, whereas the PS4 was stuck at 30 FPS a lot. And I just think about what is on the sort of cards when it comes to things that could exist on the PS6, and there's not a lot of stuff that would really give you that level of a step forward. Now, I'll be honest.
Well, that's the thing. That's what a lot of people were, worried about. And that's what Sean Layden was saying, that when you introduce the PS6, it needs to be more than just power as a selling point. And that 100% has to happen. And I think Sony has a lot of stuff to show off with the PS6. And they usually do innovate, so I look forward to that.
I still use a regular launch PS5 at home. Obviously, we have all these lovely things to play with here at the office, but I have felt zero need to upgrade my personal PS5 to the Pro. And I think a lot of people are in that same boat. When you think about the PS5 Pro launched only a little over a year ago, it's clear that Sony have left their options open. I mean, this is not an old console, and it's selling reasonably well, is my understanding. But it also means that if this is what they can do in 4 years, how much better could the PS6 really be? And just to put all of this in context, PlayStation isn't just important to Sony. It practically is Sony at this point. I mean, they just sold off 51% of their Bravia TV division. The irony is that a big reason why Sony even greenlit PlayStation to begin with was to sell more TVs. And now they sold their TV division to spend more money on PlayStation, which is now their biggest business by far. And the PS5 generation is already their most profitable console ever. So when we talk about whether or not Sony's to feel any kind of rush to get the PS6 out the door, I mean, the stakes are huge here.
That's what I was saying. Like, they got to make sure they do this perfectly. So a year back is definitely a good thing to make sure this is important. You know what I mean? This is our foundation now, where it's as big as as the Switch is to Nintendo, because they're mostly gaming now. Though Sony still has other divisions and they're still multi-conglomerate. What he's saying is correct, where it's like, yeah, dude, we got to make sure we do this right. Whereas Microsoft, most of them are just, it's Windows and AI and all that stuff and data centers. Like, it's different for them. They don't have to worry about that type of stuff. Sony does.
Not afford another disaster like the PS3. They have to get this right, which brings us to the other half of this story. This is the first generation where Sony doesn't have anyone forcing them to compete.
Yeah.
Now, we've talked about this a lot recently.
So don't need to rush.
The traditional console war is basically over. After spending 25 years building Xbox as the main competitor to PlayStation, it seems a lot like Xbox is in the middle of a strategic pivot from being a console to being a platform. Game Pass, Windows Gaming. They're trying to be on your phone, your TV, your PC, your handheld. They're already on your toaster, but being a direct competitor to the PlayStation just doesn't seem to be in the cards anymore. For Sony, this changes things in a big way. For the first time in decades, there's no one breathing down their neck. There's no Xbox Series Z that Sony has to respond to. There's no pressure to push hardware out the door just to stay competitive. Now, of course, Nintendo exists. Wahoo! But the Switch 2 launched at $450, which is yet another sign of what we all already knew. I can't do a Yoshi impression, and gaming hardware just keeps getting more and more expensive.
Yoshi, that's Mario.
But Nintendo, they haven't competed in power since like 2001. They're off doing their own thing, and I will tell you that the Switch 2 is not going to make anyone at Sony panic over having to rush out the PS6.
No.
So, Sony is sitting on a profitable console, a library that's finally hitting its stride, and almost no pressure from the competition to move on to the next generation. When is the last time that happened? Because I legitimately don't think it ever has. This really is uncharted territory. Emphasis on the Nathan Drake. But even if they wanted to rush the PS6 out, I'm not convinced that it's even possible. Money is almost always one of the most important factors when it comes to consoles. Think about how pricing used to work. Emphasis on the sad past tense. The PS3 launched at $500 and was quickly a disaster. By the end of its life, it was down to $200 and it ended up narrowly outselling the Xbox 360. The PS4 launched at $400, then came down to $300. This is a world where consoles were almost impulse purchases. I mean, a few $100 to get into the current generation of gaming that would last 7, 8 years or more, not a hard sales pitch.
Exactly. It used to be like that. Now it's like you start off, you may be more expensive than what you started off with, and you ain't going down. It's so dumb. Like, oh, good Lord. But like he was saying, you know, Sony doesn't really have to worry about that because the PS5 and the PS5 Pro are enough to compete with Nintendo in the current market. They don't need a PS6 to compete with Nintendo. You know what I mean? And Microsoft's not a threat to them no more. So they need to focus on what matters most. And that's getting your game lineup good, no more cancels, doing things the right way, building with the community the right way, giving good deals. And then when you launch the PS6, it's ready to launch. It's not about power. So you need to focus on the things that matter most. There's enough of that, and the diminishing returns are more higher than ever. He has a good point here. And you know, when it comes to competing with Nintendo, once again, you're not competing with power. What are you competing with? The things that matter the most, man. They have a lot of really good video games. They have a lot of good exclusives. They have a very strong identity, and they have your attention on and off the screen. And they gave you the inspiration, like everybody else again, to get back into the handheld industry. So it gives you the idea that there's a lot of things here in gaming that make you successful, that make you win. And it has nothing to really do with power. Because even when you look into the handheld industry, I've told this to people before, and even with Nintendo consoles, when they win, the Switch 2, the Wii, which beat the 360 and beat the PlayStation 3, the DS, you see what I mean, which destroyed the Vita, the 3DS, or PSP actually, the 3DS, right? The Game Boy Advance, none of them were more powerful. The PS2 was not more powerful than the original Xbox or GameCube. You see what I mean? Sega Genesis and Sega consoles had more power than Super Nintendo consoles back in the days. But Game Boy still sold 100 and something million, and it was weaker than all of them, but that wasn't the point. And Nintendo still beat Sega. You know what I mean? PlayStation came and did that, but because of a CD trend. It was certain things that Sony did, even with PS2, like the prices they gave people, the DVD players. It's not really power that's winning. It's different things that always do that. And if you start to notice that, you'll realize things. It was like the Series X versus the PS5. It's like, it doesn't matter. See what I mean? Their lowest selling console pretty much damn near around the original Xbox, not too far from that. But that was good for when it first came out. So gamers are not really moved by power. That's just, I think, like a Western flicker. I mean, people talk about it, but then it's like when you look at the real results, that's not what's going on.
Generation, things have completely flipped. Early adopters used to buy consoles on day one, and everyone else would wait for the prices to come down.
Yeah.
I mean, the PS5 launched at $500, and 5 years later, it's more expensive? Not less? Wait, what? Did I not get the memo? Well, at least the Xbox is $650? Now, sure, there were some world events that influenced some of these price hikes, but I would argue that the economics of building consoles, they have fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
Consoles aren't impulse buys anymore. They are major investments, more similar to something like a gaming PC purchase, and that changes how everyone thinks about generations. I remember, I had a conversation with a Microsoft engineer right around the time that the Xbox Series X launched, and he described a big reason why they launched the Series S alongside the Series X. Normally, this would have been a classic mid-generation update, right? You got your little slim version, you got your big guy, but this time around, they had forecast that unlike previous generations, things were not going to get significantly cheaper as time went on. The secret console sauce forever was that every couple of years, they could shrink the main chips to be more power efficient and cheaper to make. That just simply wasn't going to be the case going forward. Microsoft knew that from the very beginning. I mean, think about it. If Sony launched a PS6 today at $700 or $800, I mean, it would sell, sure, but not in the same kind of numbers that previous PlayStations have been at. Which brings us to the reason I think we went from seeing Sony happily talking about their next generation tech in public to the rumors heavily suggesting that we're looking at a delayed PS6.
The RAM crisis.
The short version is that AI data centers are quite literally eating the global supply of memory, with SSDs and GPUs not far behind. Now, this is not some theoretical future problem.
Correct.
It's happening right now. It makes me think about one of the smartest decisions that Sony made last generation. Right up until the last minute, the plan was for the PS4 to ship with only 4 gigs of RAM instead of 8. Now thankfully, they were able to ship it with 8 gigs of RAM, which removed the one competitive advantage that the Xbox One would have had. We all know how that story went. Used games, handshake, sad Don Matrick. Now imagine Sony launches the PS6 into this market. What if they had to ship it with 16 gigs of memory instead of 24 or 32 just because of supply constraints? What if they have to nerf the size of the GPU to make a PS5 Pro instead of a full PS6? Not only is that a terrible bit of branding, but these are honestly the kind of decisions that can define an entire generation.
Exactly. So if you won already and you know you don't have the competition that you used to have before, there's no need to worry about that. The generation was already partially cooked with the Unreal Engine 5 stuttering, bad performance, lazy devs, AI shortcuts, all that nonsense. And then these price hikes coming up, there's no need to rush when you could easily just put the generation out and then place it correctly. What is going to happen to you? Nothing. They don't have to do it. So now more than ever, they could be in that comfortable position and just compete with Nintendo, just launching good games and focus on games and release a PS6 when they have the right moment to do it, because Sony's not going to just launch the PS6 and only have like 1 million consoles and then have to sit there waiting for good deals. No, it's like they're trying to make 6, 7, 8 million, like right off the bat, you know what I mean? And that's a lot of component prices, and you have to keep on doing that, consistently getting chips and parts and having long-term agreements for years. So you have to make sure that stuff is stable. And a 1-year delay has to happen minimum. So that's easily 2028 late.
Lets the market hopefully stabilize. Waiting means Sony can actually hit the specs they want at a price point that people can actually afford. This is the part that I think it's easy to miss. Waiting isn't about chasing the absolute bleeding edge. Sometimes it's just about value. Look at the Switch 2. It uses an NVIDIA chip made on Samsung's 8nm tech, a process node that NVIDIA started shipping GPUs on back in 2020, yet the Switch 2 went on sale in 2025. Especially when it comes to consoles, patience actually can be a virtue as manufacturing processes mature and there's less competition for those bleeding edge nodes. Now, of course, there are rumors about what we're going to expect to see in the PS6. AMD's Zen 6 CPU and RDNA 5 GPU, it makes sense, but I would take all of the specifics with a pretty big grain of salt. AMD is only going to continue to improve things, and Sony will have more flexibility on what parts to pull from the bin. The end result should be a better console at a more reasonable cost. I just think that considering where we are today, with the PS5 Pro not being an obvious upgrade over the PS5, component costs being massively inflated, people more hesitant than ever to drop big money on a console, and probably most importantly, PS5 is doing well, and it is a legitimately great console. Rushing the next gen, it just doesn't make sense. The PS6 will come, that's not really in question. But for the first time in a long time, Sony actually has the luxury of getting it right instead of just getting it out the door. And after how rocky the PS5's first few years were, maybe that's exactly what this generation needs. If you enjoyed this video, definitely be sure to subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, it's a good video, and there's just no need to rush. And we have enough. It's more like do things the right way. the way people deserved it the entire generation. Let me know what you guys think about this. Once again, this is another angle of realizing why this generation needs to finish strong, why everything needs to be done the correct way, and how Sony does not need to rush. What for? They're in a really good position, and they're making more money than ever. So there's no need for the PS6, and they can't afford to put that out and rush it out at a bad placement where prices are ridiculous and they're forced to not subsidize. Yeah, that would be a huge mistake for them. So just write it out as long as you can. Let me know what you guys think. Leave a comment down below. Peace out. Keep gaming, no matter what platform you're on.